Welcome, everybody. My name is Tim Adams. I'm the owner of Tomato Systems, an audiovisual system integrator for small to medium-sized churches. And this is the Straight Talk podcast, where we're talking about issues and difficulties that pastors face every day. With me today is Pastor Nicholas Jones, and he and I go way, way back. But Nick, why don't you... Way back. Why don't you introduce yourself and just tell us what it is that you do on a weekly basis?
Well, as Tim said, my name is Nicholas Jones. I pastor in Oregon. I pastor two churches here in the McMinnville, Grand Ronde, Western Oregon area. I've been a pastor for going on 16 years. The first time I met Tim was my first year in ministry out of college and at the Sunnyside Adventist Church in Portland, Oregon. So that's kind of tells you how far back we go. One of the things that really called me into ministry was, you asked what I was doing on a daily basis, but I'm going to get there.
Yeah.
One of the things that really called me into ministry was this idea of sharing the love of Christ with people. And I'm sure a lot of pastors resonate with that, of just this idea of God loves everyone. And how can we share that with people? I remember when God called me into ministry, he called me through the suffering Christ on the cross, where Christ was on the cross reminding people of his love. This is what I would go through for you. And so that call of sharing that love, that ultimate sacrifice with people is really the why that I continue in ministry. What I do on a daily basis really, it just varies. It's a calling that can have extremely busy days and can have non-busy days at the same time. I work in a unique situation where I pastor two churches, and one of the churches is really closely connected with a school. And so I spend a lot of time during the school year at the school interacting with the parents and the students and the teachers. And this is our denomination school. It's a Seventh-day Adventist school. However, it is there for all people. In fact, we have probably 60 to 70% non-Adventist at our school, with probably about 40% of that as non-churched.
That's impressive.
So it's a really key ministry point for this one church, where our focus is really engaging with those families and engaging with those students and parents, particularly ones that don't have a faith, and how we can help them explore their own faith and what that means. So I spend a lot of time during the school year at the school interacting with several of the classes because I'm a class pastor. Of course, I'm writing sermons. Of course, I'm involved in various things at the school. For example, we just had a spring program, and we had Tim come in and help us install some lighting for the program. And so I was behind the scenes and organizing that, making sure that happened, and then running the lighting and sound for the spring program. There's lots of big projects. I go on field trips for the classes I'm a pastor of, constantly reading, board meetings for both churches and the school. I'm the finance chair for the school. I mean, the list could go on of the different things that I do. And it's just on a daily basis, it changes. And some days it's extremely busy. Some weeks it's extremely busy, and some weeks it's not.
So on average, you're a pretty busy guy. I think it's safe to say.
It's safe to say on average, I'm pretty busy. Yeah. During the summer, I'm intentionally trying to back that off just to recover, because the school year is coming in September.
Yeah, exactly. So if you hadn't picked up on what we're talking about today, we're talking about the importance of balance. And with all the craziness and chaos that Nick has to deal with on a daily, weekly, monthly, and even yearly basis, I would imagine that organization is fairly important to you maintaining a balance.
It should be, but I have ADHD, so it's really difficult sometimes. I've actually found that just trying to be upfront with people and just say, here's what I need, has been the most beneficial, and just being transparent with people. So, for example, I try to take all my Mondays off. So we do church on Saturdays. And Sundays I try to take off, but a lot of times, like if there's work bees or school events, sometimes we'll end up on Sundays. So I try to make sure that I have Mondays off as well, just to help recover. And I try to communicate that to as many people as possible. Like they'll ask for, hey, can we have this meeting on Monday? I say, sorry, that's my day off. I can't do that. I try to really make sure that I am strong on my boundaries and communicate those boundaries to people, because people can't read my mind, and people don't keep track of my schedule. They keep track of their schedule. And so if I'm expecting them to take care of me, that's not going to happen. People are going to do what's best for them, not for me. So I have to watch out for me. And so being transparent and communicating those boundaries is a way that I try to keep that as that balance as much as possible.
Do you find that there's applications or processes that you find yourself utilizing that helps with that balance, or is it just kind of all in your head?
So I definitely use. I have discovered Microsoft Outlook within the past few months. I'd been using a different email service, and then I finally broke down and started using Microsoft Outlook because I wasn't happy with the other email service. And the integration of the calendar and emails and all of that kind of together has really helped with scheduling and being able to see things at a big picture. I have to schedule, I have to put stuff on the calendar, because if I don't, then I will forget it. My brain does not work in a way that remembers things
Yeah.
easily. And I constantly have to give myself grace for times that I forget, when people ask me to do things and I don't write it down, or I don't write down who asked me to include it or when to. So, for example, I send out a weekly newsletter for our church, and this just happened just last week. Someone had asked me to put in the newsletter that we were going to have a breakfast potluck for church. And they told me it was going to be the second week in July and the second week in August, second Saturday in July and August, that we would do this. And somehow I wrote that down, but I didn't write down who told me that.
Ah,
And so I forgot. Somehow my brain was not working properly, and I sent it out in our last newsletter, and everybody was like, are we having a potluck brunch this week? What's going on? And it wasn't until after the fact that someone said, hey, what was going on? And I realized, so I have to be careful in even how I write stuff down. But definitely writing stuff down, scheduling calendar work is extremely important, and trying to stay on top of that. And it definitely does help, especially when I do important things like time with my family, to actually write it down on the calendar. I think it was Tom Rainer who said, what gets scheduled gets done, or something along those lines. And so if I don't write it down and I don't schedule it, it's not going to happen. It's not going to work.
I remember reading, I'm a big Tom Clancy fan, and I remember in one of the books, one of his characters is a physician, and she always carries a notebook around, because when you have an idea or a thought or you remember something, if you don't write it down, according to this character, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And I have found that concept to be very, very helpful in my
Yeah.
own life, because especially these days, we try to carry so much in our heads that if you don't have something, be it a process or some kind of technology solution to help you keep track of everything, there's going to be a lot of things that fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
And
Well,
go ahead.
yeah. One of the things that has really helped me is, like, if someone's talking to me at church and they're like, hey, can we do this? Or can you remember to send an email out for something or other? If it's possible, right then and there, I'll pull out my handy landy brain, my phone, and schedule it. Or if I don't have my phone on me, I'll tell them, can you remember to email me that reminder, or can you remember to
Right.
get in touch with me? And put that on them to make sure that they get back in touch with me and say, hey, this is important. Because sometimes I have found as a pastor that people have really neat ideas that are half baked, and so they'll expect me to fully bake the idea on
Yeah.
my own. And I think it's important sometimes to recognize that their idea or calling to the idea is not necessarily my calling to the idea. And so if they're wanting my help in processing that, I'm more than happy to do that. But it's got to be something that's important to them. And so if I put that effort back on them and saying, hey, if this is important to you, get back in touch with me at a time, or send me an email about this conversation so we can talk about it more. That puts more ownership on the other person. And that also creates a boundary for me, that I'm not just going to be someone that you can say, hey, can you do this for me, without, you know, any kind of involvement in it whatsoever.
Sure. You know, you've had something of a unique work history in that, you've been pastor of multiple churches, and you've also been a pastor at a single church. And I'm wondering what role within the context of you balancing work and life and everything does delegation to lay leadership or lay people play in helping you maintain a balance?
You know, it's in theory, it's an important thing. Um, in
Right.
theory, it would be great if I could have the the ability to delegate, or the people to delegate things to. Functionally, I'm pastoring two smaller churches that already have a group of individuals that are probably already on the verge of burnout, because with the size of the church is, everyone who's already attending is already doing everything.
Yeah.
There's not many people attending that aren't already doing stuff and heavily involved in things. So any added thing that we as a leadership come up with or decide to do, it's a big discussion of how do we incorporate this into what we're already doing. Is this something that needs to be added to, or is this something that needs to take the place of? Is there something that we need to let go in order to make room for this? And so that's the challenge that we face in my current situation. When I was pastoring a single church, it was, again, similar in the sense of, I would love to see more involvement with church members in various things, not necessarily delegating, but involvement in team leadership.
Hmm.
But we live such busy lives these days that churches, at least the ones that I've pastored in the last few years, churches seem to be wanting to just be a place that we gather, and that's about it. No real desire to do more outside of what they're already doing, whether what they're doing is successful or not. I have a very strong belief that if you are a follower of Jesus, you would want to be involved in sharing that love with people, no matter what church you attend or what position you hold. And even if you're in what we would call higher leadership, like elders, deacons, you would be more involved in those things. And I have yet to really pastor a church that really has really lived up to that.
Well, you bring up a good point, and since we have a little time, I'm wondering, in your experience, do you find that in the smaller the church, the less you see the 80-20 rule in effect, or is that still pretty much across the board something that you see happening, where 20% of the people do 80% of the work?
I think the in general that percentage still plays out even in the smaller church. It's just that the 80% of people are maybe not attending.
Mm.
So you see the 20% that are regularly attending. Um, one of the churches that I pastor is heading towards the coast, and they have pretty much everybody who attends um, is involved in something at the church, and they're not an active church in the regards of um, evangelism or outside programs. They're very much kind of focused on themselves and shepherding the people that are there. The other church that's involved with the school, most of the people that show up on a Saturday morning for church are definitely involved in various aspects of church, whether it be holding a position or heavily involved in out of church ministries
Mm.
or involved in the school. So almost everybody who attends both of these churches have a part to play that they play. I don't have a lot of people who are not involved in something in these two churches. But if you compare that to the amount of membership on the books, that percentage probably still plays out.
I gotcha. I think it's also important to mention that the church that you pastor that meets at the school is also a mobile church. So,
Right. Yeah, we don't have our own building.
Yeah. So, in terms of, contextually, there's generally with mobile churches, you see a higher percentage of the members being present to set up and tear down and that kind of thing than you would maybe normally see in a situation where you have a building of your own.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that's important to understand too. And do you find that the demands of your members are different between a mobile church and a church with a building?
I'll compare the mobile church that I have with the single church that I used to pastor. The demands are completely different. The single church that I pastored was very much a pastor-centric church, and they wanted the pastor to do not almost everything, but a lot.
Yeah.
The church I'm talking about.
Uh-huh.
And so they have a very high, pastor, you need to take care of this. Pastor, you need to do this. Pastor, you need to do that. The mobile church or the pop-up church or the church that we have intentionally decided to stay at the school and meet in the school, that because the school is our ministry. Their expectations of my involvement are less because they know that I am at the school involved with the students. And so there's not this demand for me to do everything in the sense of in the same sense that the other church had. So there's this recognition that my ministry is at the school. And then the other church that I pastor, they also recognize that my calling in this district is to the students and the families at the school. So they don't put a lot of pressure on me. Of course, they'd love to see me more. Of course, they'd love me to be more involved and stuff. I mean, that's what, people want with their pastor. But they also have a recognition that what I'm doing, and especially because I communicate what's happening at the school with this other church, they see what God is doing in the school. And so in a way, they're also involved in the ministry of that school by recognizing where my ministry has been happening.
Right. That's awesome. So I'm throwing you a lot of curveballs here, and you're doing great.
Oh, thanks.
To field them. I'm wondering, given that I know your history and how you've kind of navigated around the area and through various churches and situations, how do you, or maybe I should just ask this, how did you kind of get up on your feet when you were at a single church and you moved to a district church situation? Now, you also were a district church before, right? You had 3.
I had so
didn't you?
I went from a 2-church district to one church, and then I went from that one church to 3. But just
Okay.
recently, one of the churches that I had in this district got stepped down to what we call a group status and is connected to another church. And so my
Okay.
involvement there is more on a, if they have an emergency, they need a pastor to call for a death or a hospital visit or something, they call me. But it's not a,
Sure.
I'm not there on Saturdays to preach. I'm not there regularly. It's not part of my regular, um, uh, my regular,
Responsibilities.
yes, responsibilities.
Yeah, I
Um,
got you.
so going from a single church to this three church districts that's now a two, but at the time was a three, was interesting because we moved in the middle of COVID. So so we left the one church to come to this three church district in the middle of COVID. So getting up on my feet was definitely it was a challenge to come, and basically we're meeting online and having to navigate that. The school is meeting kind of in person but kind of online, and having to navigate all of that, and
Yeah.
then having to come in, and instead of, in general, there's like this honeymoon period when you switch churches of just, everything's feeling good, you got this new pastor and things are, you don't rock the boat a lot within your first year as you try to get to know the people. Here I'm having to set boundaries, I'm having to create systems, I'm having to tell them, no, we have to make sure we wear masks and following these rules and guidelines. That's my, as I'm getting up to speed, I'm having to be this tough, we've got to do it this way and have those discussions. And I make it appear as if I was a lot tougher than I was actually was, but having the conversations and
Right.
working through those issues and making sure that we were doing what we could to follow and be in line with what the recommendations at the time were. So it was a tough challenge to get up to speed, and really work through those kinds of issues.
I can only imagine, man. It's been like 3 or 4 years of just constant change for you.
I remember my wife, while we were still at the previous church, and there was some movement around our denomination conference area in Oregon, and she said something about, oh man, those poor pastors that have to move in the middle of COVID, and then a few weeks later, here we are moving in the middle of COVID.
Oh man. Well, speaking of your wife and your personal life, I know that, well, I think it's safe to say that a lot of pastors can struggle to find that work-life balance, um, particularly in the context of their personal or their family life. Um, what what have you found works for you?
Definitely scheduling, and sticking to that, being upfront with people, in regards to certain times that I have specifically reserved. So, for example, I try to reserve Friday nights for family, which can frustrate as Adventists. We a lot of times will like to do a Friday night Vespers to welcome in the Sabbath,
Right.
and it's a highly planned event and everything like that. And I have told my churches, I every once in a while maybe that's fine, but I really want to make sure that I am with my family on Friday nights. There's a lot of nights that I have evening meetings, because of finance committee and boards and other, other meetings that end up happening and in the evenings for pastors because everybody else works during the day. That Friday is reserved. So communicating that and just saying, hey, Friday night is reserved. Maybe once in a while we can do that, but it's something that we have to work out and negotiate to make, and the other thing is just having a understanding that life is sometimes busy and sometimes it's not, and being able to flow with those ups and downs and recognize there are going to be some weeks, like for example, when we're coming into the spring program for the school, there are going to be some weeks that I'm doing 60-hour weeks, as we
Right.
get ready for that. But then there are going to be some weeks that I'm doing 30, 20 to 30 hours a week. So recognizing that there's those ups and downs. I mean, and that's similar with my wife with her job too. There's going to be weeks where she's going to be working a lot, and I have to pick up the slack, and vice versa. And so I think being able to be aware of that, and expect that you can do that, because we don't, as pastors, don't have to work 60 hours a week all the time. If someone has told a pastor they have to work 60 hours a week all the time, that's a case of burnout, and you're not going to be pastoring for very long.
That's fair. Well, and I I know a couple of your outlets in your personal life, but how important is it for you to have a hobby or time that you just have for yourself as a way of burning off stress or whatever it is that you need to kind of bring that personal time back up to where work is.
Having kids makes that difficult sometimes. But I just went camping with my girls this last weekend, and that was a beneficial time for me and my kids. It was good time for connecting with them. I was out of cell phone range, so nobody could get in touch with me. That's my favorite type of vacation. But also I try to make time for exercise. I love cycling. I've just spent, however, a year and a half working and rebuilding a motorcycle, so I haven't been cycling as much. But after this interview, I'll probably go on a bike ride before my evening meetings, just to get out there again. I went cycling yesterday. I have a motorcycle that I have been restoring and is running, so I ride that a lot as well. But then also just recognizing, restorative relationship with God is really an important aspect, and something that I've been discovering in the last few years is that too often I think we systematize our relationship with Christ. And
Mm-hmm.
so it becomes a check mark. So I have to wake up
Yeah.
early, so I spend this amount of time with God. And been trying to reframe my time with God as not so much a system, even though we need systems at times, but a restorative relationship of recognizing that there are going to be some days that I am just way too tired to get up early, before everyone else is up. And so having this restorative relationship with God is this constant communication with him, this constant time with him. Yesterday on my bike ride, I was praying as I rode my bike. I was talking with God through some of the issues that I'm currently facing and some of the challenges that I'm currently facing. And so being able to combine those restorative actions with a restorative relationship with Christ is really, really beneficial.
Well, good segue. How important is your alone time on a regular basis with God, like in terms of like your mental and spiritual health?
I think it's important, but not as important as it used to be. Some of my most rewarding time with God has been interacting with students
Mm.
and their understanding of God deepening, or being able to explain the love of God to my kids. So, while alone time with God and our secret place is important, I think we've placed too much emphasis on we always have to be alone. I think our relationship with God, just like our relationship with other human beings, is deepened in alone time and in community time. Just like a friendship with someone can be deepened with time alone with them, but also time in a group setting with them. I think God is very much the same way, is that we find a deepening relationship with him in our alone time, but also in community time. I mean, that's the point of church, right? To come together in community and as a community worship God and get to know God. And I think that is an important aspect of recognizing that our alone time with God doesn't necessarily, at least in my opinion and my experience, doesn't necessarily have to be this regimented, oh, I have to do this every day, versus I get to spend this quick time with God without any other distractions, or being aware of where God is moving in your life, despite not having that alone time, and seeing God work through you and in you in the midst of and through other people.
Yeah, I remember it was a mobile church that I was tech director for a number of years, and the way that they described their life groups or their small groups is that, these are groups of people who are living life together. And just kind of dovetailing off of what you were saying, I feel like a lot of times, more times than I'd like to admit, we all tend to put God in like this little box
Yeah.
where, we're comfortable with him. And kind of what you're saying, this regular alone time with God in the morning that really is based more out of duty. Like, this is what we're supposed to do as Christians, rather than something that's dynamic and alive, like an actual relationship, right? We tend to like, okay, this is the time that I have for you. I'm going to take you out of your box. We're going to have our time, and then I'm going to put you back in the box, and I'm going to move on with my day. And
Yeah.
especially as guys, like, I'm
Yeah.
not sure if you're familiar with Mark Gungor, but like,
Yeah.
Laugh Your Way to a Better Marriage. It's like
Yeah.
everything as a guy, we
As a
have
box.
boxes and they don't touch,
Right.
right? And so we have a box for God, and we don't allow him oftentimes to touch any of our other boxes when he should be in every box, right? And so I find that it's really hard a lot of times to be that vulnerable, because
Mm-hmm.
as we grow up, we've been vulnerable with people, either because we're helpless as kids, we're innocent, or we've let somebody in and we get hurt, right?
Yeah.
So we tend to put up these walls, and then we project that onto God, and that's a whole different
Yeah.
podcast episode. But um, I've heard you mention a, a lot about boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems like that's a very important thing for you. And based on other conversations I've had with other pastors, over the years, um, church members can be nasty sometimes. Um, and
I laugh because it's true.
I think, I mean, we're all human, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there are times when in particular churches, there is a culture of me first. I'm more important than everybody else. What I want, is more important. I donate a lot of money to the church, therefore I should have more say and
Yeah.
influence in how the church is run. And, again, that's a whole nother topic.
Right.
But
Yeah.
how is it that you go about putting up boundaries, and when people push back, how do you handle that?
It's an interesting question because I'm terrible at boundaries. As someone, as much as I'd like to think of myself as not a people pleaser, I want everybody to be happy. And so there's especially, and this is the hardest part, when I feel passionate about something, it's very easy for me to start letting boundaries go. So for example, at the school, sometimes I'm very passionate about what's going on at the school. And so I find myself a lot of times going, yeah, I can do that. And, it's energizing to be involved in something where you see God moving. And, it's appropriate sometimes to say, okay, this boundary is okay to let down for this moment. But how do I keep that strong in the face of other things is basically just, from what I found, just continuing to communicate and to basically say, I can't do that. That's not something that I'm going to be able to do. And just being okay with that. That's the hardest thing. As pastors, we want people to be happy. We want people to be involved. We want people to go beyond what they're able to do. And mostly because a lot of times we are going beyond what we're able to do because of the expectations of church members, because we want to see the church succeed. I mean, I think every pastor out there or in general wants to see the church that they're pastoring find growth, not only numerically, but spiritually. And so a lot of times we work ourselves more than we should because we want to see that growth. But ultimately, it's like, I use this analogy a lot. You can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And a lot of times that's with church members too, is you can continually show church members, hey, this is where we have to go. But unless they buy in or unless the Spirit really moves them, they're going to keep doing what they're doing. So just recognizing that you can't change people, that's the job of the Holy Spirit.
Right.
I can't change someone's mind. I can argue till I'm blue in the face. I can appeal, but I can't change their mind for them. They have to be open to the Holy Spirit to move. And so just recognizing that, there may be times where I'm just going to have to disappoint people, and that's okay. It's the hardest thing. It's still, even though I say that and it sounds easy for me to say, it's hard for me to do. I mean, it's very easy to say this, and in actuality, I can't do it. I still hate doing it, but that's a journey that I'm still on, of finding a way to be comfortable with. I'm sorry, I'm going to disappoint you, but I can't do this. This is not going to work. This is not something that I can do for you at this time.
Right. Well, and yeah, I've seen a lot of pastors get in a lot of trouble because they're not good at putting up boundaries.
Yeah.
Um, I remember hearing about a church, that a fairly large church in our system, that they had three associates and a senior, and the senior was so good at delegating um, work to the associates that every single associate had actually passed out from the stress and gone to the
Wow.
ER.
Wow.
And I'm like, at what point does the conference step in and like,
Yeah.
what's
Wow.
going on here? Why is this happening? So I I guess I got a couple more questions for you.
Yeah. Well, let
Other
me
than,
let me address that real quick. I think
okay,
as a society, us pastors are just, unfortunately, instead of leading the way in healthy boundaries and healthy ways to approach work, we're following society in the, and I think this is a problem within Western, primarily American culture, of we find it a a good thing to be busy. We talk about side hustles. If you want more money, you got to get a side hustle, or maybe two side hustles. And I mean, I love some of the stuff that Dave Ramsey says about getting debt free, but at the same time, two side hustles to your normal job, you're going to be working yourself to death.
yeah,
We're encouraging, and we think it's a good attribute to have when people say, "Hey, how you doing?" Well, I'm busy. We don't understand the cycle of busyness and rest as a society. And I think, as a Seventh-day Adventist, where we identify the importance of a day of rest,
hmm,
we choose Saturday, but there are a lot of people out there that have other days where they're like, this is my day of rest. I'm not going to do work. This idea of a cycle of work and rest is something that we as pastors really need to better share and model. Of, we can't do everything, so why try?
yeah,
There's an importance in, there's a reason God rested in creation. There's a reason God talked about a day of rest in the commandments. There's a reason that Jesus rested, in the New Testament. And if the Savior rested on a day, why are we trying to work 7 days a week? Yeah. And why are we buying into the busyness culture of our society? And so I think that's something that we as a church, need to do better in recognizing that it's okay to rest, and let's fight this cycle of busyness, because it's not healthy. It's not helping us.
well, that actually makes me think of a couple things. One is, if you're familiar with the John Eldredge message, he is very convinced that the spirit of this age is busyness.
Yeah.
And I've also heard this analogy, comparing ministries inside of a church to a highway, and vehicles on that highway. And a lot of times there are ministries, let's call them buses, that stay on that highway way longer than they should be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and just because you have a great idea for a ministry, you know, there's this idea of asking God the next question. So, you may feel impressed to do a ministry, but are you asking the next question? Like, is now the time for this ministry?
Yeah.
who is this ministry supposed to be reaching? Um, it's almost like I've got a great idea and we're off to the races,
Right.
right? Nobody
And does it
stops to
fit
think,
and does it fit the vision and the culture of the place that you're in? You
right?
know, that's one of the things I think that as churches we struggle with. A lot of churches will do this vision casting, and they'll come up with a vision statement and a mission statement, but then they don't filter their programs or their outreach ideas or ministry ideas through that and
Yeah,
figure out, okay, is this actually fulfilling our vision and mission? And so that's something that as a pastor I have to continually work with this one church in the school, because people come, hey, we have this great idea, and I have to say, does this fit the mission of our church in supporting the school, or is it something that's going to take people away from that specific mission?
right.
And I have to have those tough conversations with people and say, no, as a church we don't have enough people to diversify that much. we're,
Well,
we're not a
and
1,000+ member church.
yeah, exactly. Well, and if you look at what's happening in the world right now, surrounding kids and all of the messaging and all of
Yeah.
the imagery that the kids are now being uh, becoming accustomed to, sadly, investing in a mission that is Christ-centered and God-focused in the educational sector is hugely important,
Yeah.
hugely important. So as we wrap up, I'm just wondering, pertaining to balance and the discussion that we've been having over the last hour, what are some other thoughts, suggestions, things that you have found work for you that you might be able to offer your fellow brethren in the ministry?
My fellow brothers and sisters in ministry.
Thank you for being
um
inclusive.
yeah. I think, one of the things is definitely, don't feel bad about taking a day or two off. The majority of the world gets a 2-day weekend. um you know and so I try to make sure that I take Sundays and Mondays off as much as possible, and I'm not apologetic about that. If everyone else gets a 2-day weekend, there's no requirement that they have to come to church. There's no requirement that says, oh, you have to be at church. There's a
Right.
requirement for me to be at church because I'm paid to be at church,
Yeah.
but there's no requirement. They choose to be at church, but I have to be at church. So taking a 2 days off a week and being unapologetic about that and being okay with that, I think is one of the best ways. It's one of the best changes that I ever made in my life. To saying, you know what, I'm going to take 2 days off a week. And I know there's going to be pastors, and I know there's going to be people who disagree with me on that, and that's fine. I don't, you can disagree with me. I don't care. That's kind of what I tell people. Look, this is where I'm at, and if you disagree with me, that's okay. I'm not going to hold it against you. I just disagree with you, and you disagree with me, and that's okay. I don't mind.
That's
But I
allowed.
think, yeah, it's allowed. I think that doing that 2-day weekend has really, really helped my balance. Just being able to realize that, hey, I have something the same as everyone else now. I'm not being forced to work 6 days a week or 7 days a week. I'm working five normal days and a sixth day to do stuff around the house that I need to, or be able to go do something with my family if I want to. I have that weekend in a sense.
Right.
So being unapologetic about having 2 days off. I mean, as pastors, our schedule is kind of our own. It's a really unique position in that we kind of have our own schedule. We kind of set our own schedule. We don't have a boss telling us, hey, I need this on this day. And, I mean, we just have hundreds of bosses that tell us what we should do. But I mean, so I think that's the one that really has changed my life, is just being okay and just saying, you know what, I'm just going to take 2 days, and I'm not going
Yeah.
to be apologetic about it. I'm not going to say I'm sorry. I'm not going to feel bad about it or guilty, because I need rest as much as everyone else. So finding balance, I think that is the first thing. And then the second thing is just being okay with seasons of busyness and seasons of downtime.
Yeah.
Because, especially around Easter, Christmas, holidays, and with the school year, I'm involved in seasons of busyness, and being okay with, okay, it's just going to be a tough slog this week or these next 2 weeks, and being okay with just the waves of life, and recognizing that on the weeks where you don't have a lot to do, just go, you know what, 2 weeks ago I was working 60-hour weeks, so you know what, it's okay, I'm going to take it easy this week. Sure, I've got emails to do, maybe I have some meetings, but I'm not going to really force myself to find or invent things to do or do more than I have to,
Right.
just to recover from that. And I think, if you're going to do those busy weeks, make sure you have those recovery weeks as well. Very, very important. And take your vacation. You get vacation for a reason. Take it. Take it. I can't say this. I wish the United States had, there's another topic, but I wish the United States was more like Europe in the sense of recognizing the need for rest, and this idea of, you have vacation, take it. It should be an embarrassment that you come to the end of the year with vacation still on your paycheck that you haven't taken yet. That should be an embarrassment. Again, my opinion, but I think, we need rest. We are creatures that cannot function at this high level for long periods of time without having a crash, and having a healthy cycle of busy and rest, I think, really helps moderate that out.
Well, and if I remember correctly, studies have shown that you need at least like the first 3 days of your vacation is what it takes you to just kind of acclimate to shutting down,
Yeah,
right? So if you're taking a long weekend as your yearly vacation,
yeah,
no,
it's not enough.
that's not enough. So
Well,
I
and it's
100%
it's
agree with you.
it's interesting with pastors because we take on so much stress. I remember a pastor friend of mine who went on a 3 week vacation, and he said that as he was coming back into port from the cruise, he could feel the stress of pastoring come back into his body from his feet
Wow.
all the way up to his head. And he actually ended up having some health troubles because of the stress that he had as a pastor. Pastors on average live 5 to 10 years less than most other people,
Wow, I hadn't
because of
heard that.
this. Yeah, because of the stress that we are under, that we allow ourselves to be put under, that the expectations that church members put on us, we take on that stress. And unfortunately, I have experienced that as well, going on vacation and coming back and feeling that stress just creep back in.
Man, that's a shocking stat. That's a really sobering stat.
Yeah.
Holy cow. Final question. Do you find that trying to include your family in the ministry as a pastor helps you, hinders you, or is just kind of a non-issue?
Um, I try to include them as they want to be included.
Okay.
I don't want to force my kids to do things they don't want to do. I don't make my I don't tell my family, you need to come to me with this other church.
Right.
My kids are young; they're in elementary school, and they don't need to be shuffled from one church to another. There's no kids at the other church that I pastor, and so I don't want to put them through that. I want them to enjoy church. I want them to enjoy time with their friends. Um, that's that's something that I take flack for, because my family's not with me at the other church, and I just tell them, look, their spiritual life is more important to me than your expectation of me. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. I know that you want to see them. I know that you would love to love on them, but their spiritual walk is better. It is more important to me than them coming with me. I don't need them to come with me to do my job. So as I encourage what they want to do. My oldest daughter, she is starting to get interested in singing, and so when I lead music, I ask her every time I lead music if she wants to help out. And there have been a couple times where she said, yeah, I want to help out. And then there's several times where she's like, no, I don't really want to. And so I allow her, I work with her. I try not to force them to do stuff they don't want to do. I try
Right.
to involve them as they want to be involved. And in the times that they want to be involved, it's a blessing to me. It's a blessing to them. It's a blessing to the church. At the times that they don't want to be involved, it's still a blessing to me as they're creating their own boundaries. And I'm able to help teach them the importance of setting boundaries, even at this age in elementary school.
Well, and that's hugely important for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
So that's good on you. Anything else? No? All right. Well, Nick, I think we're pretty much out of time, but I want to thank you for coming and sharing part of your journey, and certainly contributing your expertise and knowledge and experience. And for those of you that found this helpful, please let us know. And until next time, I'm signing off.